Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I am joined by Cassandra Rosa. And for everyone who is listening, her and I have been chatting before we started recording because there's a ton of things that we realized that we have in common, and it's just such a small world. And we will get into all of that, I'm sure. But before we get into that, she is an intuitive life coach and healer, a Reiki master, a podcaster, which you know I love, and the author of the upcoming book, Now What? Create the Clarity to Achieve Your Dreams. And we are definitely going to talk about that. But before we get into all of that, do you want to introduce yourself for people who might not be familiar with you?
Yeah. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for this opportunity to speak with you. I'm so excited to see how even more that we connect. So I'm from Toronto, Canada. I'm an intuitive life coach. My mission is really to help women and millennials to find clarity of their path and purpose so that they can confidently create a fulfilling life and business. I'm sure we'll share a lot about my story on this podcast today, but it's been a beautiful journey to transform from this little girl that wanted to make a difference in the world and not knowing what it meant to having a huge now what moment, like what am I going to do with my life, to now being a coach and just feeling so fulfilled every morning to have the life that I have and serve the people that I'm meant to. So yeah.
And I love this. And you talk about the now what moment, which is what you are calling the book. That's the title of the book.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the now what moment, because people who listen to this podcast know that when I graduated, so one of the things we were talking about before we started recording is we went to the same university. We both took psychology at the same university, just at different times. And so for me, in my third year of psych, I found out through my psych prof that I couldn't do what I wanted to with my career. And it was my now what moment, because I had spent all of this time devoting myself to this thing that I wanted to do and realized I can't do that in this country. That's not possible.
Wow.
And so I had a really big now what moment, and my whole life sort of just drastically changed. You had a now what moment too. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, probably sitting in the same auditorium. We know, right? Yeah, actually, my book came out in 2020, and it's available on Amazon if anyone wants to check it out. But now what moments are those moments of transition in your life when there's a calling for more, but there's a lack of clarity? And it's like, yeah, I want to create this life, but something's not aligning. Now what? So those transitional moments with breakups and changing careers and graduating and figuring out what the heck you're supposed to do with your life. So that's the now what moment. And I had it sitting in an auditorium when I was at university, and they were saying, oh, instead of 8 years to become a psychologist in Canada, it's 12 now. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right. Now what?
Right. It's huge. It's huge, especially because I think based on my personal experience, you put so much effort into this thing because you have this dream of helping people. As you were saying, when we started recording, you really want to make a difference and have a huge impact on the world. And then somebody just sort of walks up and, they put a little pin in that balloon that you have. And you're like, well, now what? I don't understand what is happening in my life in this moment. And the clarity can be really hard to come by. It takes a lot of self-reflection. It takes a lot of internalizing what your goal actually was and how you can change that and still accomplish what feels right. So this is what you do for people. You help them to find that.
Yeah. Yeah. To uncover it too. I believe we all have clarity. We all have confidence. We all have purpose inside of us. And sometimes we just get so caught up in the lostness and the darkness and the uncertainty, the fear, and that disconnects us from all the greatness that we have inside of us. So I found clarity was key, having clarity of what I wanted out of life, having clarity of mind and energy and all of that was really the turning point and the tipping point for me to kind of understand, okay, this is what I want out of life. This is what fulfillment means to me. And that kind of kickstarted the process of making the big change that I was destined to have.
Which I think is amazing. And for everyone listening, if they're not sure even how to find the clarity or where to start, what suggestion would you have for them?
Looking at what you value most, right? Is it family and time for that? Is it your health? Is it your well-being? Is it helping people? Right? So we have all of that. I think if you take a second and connect with that, that can become clear, and there can be clues of what path you're meant to take. Also, it's like asking yourself, if I was the most confident version of myself, what would I create in my life? If there was no limitations, if I wasn't sitting in this fear, if I wasn't in my bed with the covers over my head freaking out, and I was the most confident version of myself, like, people love Beyonce and think Beyonce is powerful, right? Like if you were Beyonce, if you were Rihanna, if you're all these people that you admire and you showed up to the occasion, what kind of life would you create? And often that's what it is. It's just the fear that's holding you back.
Which is a big part of this whole experience of life, right? So let's talk about that a little bit, because I find what happens is people get paralyzed by the fear, right? Because we are consistently, just based on how our brains are built, we are consistently thinking, what if? And it's always a what if in the negative sense rather than in the positive sense.
Right.
So from a fear standpoint, it can be really hard to overcome that objection. So for people who are listening, one of the suggestions I would make is, rather than focusing on those like what ifs could go wrong, think about if everything went right, what would it look like? And sure, not everything's going to go right. We both know that, right? But good things can still happen even if they don't unfold the way you think they're going to.
Right. 100%. I think it's acknowledging that the fear is out there and where it's coming from. It's the media, right? It's your family that has the best intentions, but they want to keep you safe.
Sure.
Society, right? You're putting a level of awareness of all of this outside stuff that's actually affecting the way that you're showing up in the world. And once you start to acknowledge the negativity, right, with air quotes, all that stuff that's happening on the outside, and you realize where that's coming from, you realize it's not even yours. Yes. Also, I did like a big reframe about fear. One day I was sitting there and I realized it's a compliment. Fear is a compliment, because that means there's a part of you deep inside of you that is so excited and confident and clear that what you want can happen for you. That your comfort zone, your ego is coming in to try and get you to sit down and not have it because you've never done that before. That's unknown. That's kind of like, the caveman and a woman inside of us with like the fight or flight that, oh, it's something new. What if a lion shows up and eats you? That's kind of like that triggered response, that fight or flight that's kind of holding you back. So when you start to see the fear and acknowledge it's a compliment, that means that you're about to take one of the biggest steps in your life and you're grateful for it. That's like a first kind of step that you can have to move through it and accomplish what you want.
Oh, I love this. I love the reframe, because I think that's so important, especially right now. So we're recording this and it is the very beginning of March. It will probably air sometime in May, but there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now. And people are very focused on everything that's happened over the last couple of years, which has been a lot, everything that's currently happening in the world right now. And it can be really hard to not get stuck in that, but reframing what you're capable of doing in the moment, reframing what you can accomplish, what you can control is so important for all of us.
100%. And being aware of the outside stuff that's not serving you and making the adjustments accordingly. If you're having a friend every time you call them and they're getting into the world stuff and you've just had it, you don't want to talk about it anymore. Maybe it's setting the boundary. Hey, can we not talk about this? It gets me down and I don't want to talk about it. Or turning off the TV. Turning off the DV at 11 o'clock news or whatever, turning it off and just pausing and really seeing it as opportunity, depending on where you are in the world, if there's lockdowns or restrictions, seeing this as an opportunity for you to pause and focus on you and going inward and connecting to that clarity and figuring out what you want out of life instead of being caught up in all the chaos that's happening on the outside.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to touch on this book because fear is something that holds a lot of people back. Lots of people will say, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. I want to write a book. Most people don't do it. You wrote a book. So what led you, first of all, to writing the book?
Yeah. So I was meditating in this meditation group I'm a part of, and I got this clear message, started writing a book. And it was something that was on my vision board for year after year that I never even considered. And I was like, okay, let's just start. Let's just see if this aligns. Let's be open to the signs if this is actually what I'm meant to do. So I reached out to some of my friends that had books And there's this guy from Canada, Raymond Aaron. He's the only person that has a chicken soup for the soul book. And he actually wrote the For Dummies entrepreneurship book.
Oh, cool.
And I'd see him speak like 3 times at this point. And that's the publisher that a lot of my friends used. So I end up calling the office and being like, hey, when's your next Get Your Book Done event? They said, well, it's this weekend coming up right around the corner here. And I'm like, okay, well, things are aligning. This happens twice a year, this event. I guess this is what I should do and attend it and just go and see what happens. And I did just that. And I kickstarted the momentum, and the journey unfolded in a beautiful way. There was some temporary pauses. Like I thought I was going to launch the book in the beginning of the pandemic in February 2022. All my book edits completely disappeared. It was hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Because it was meant to come out in August of 2020. So yeah, sorry. February 2020 is when the edits were gone. And then I launched it in August, which was perfect because that was like the height of the pandemic. And that was the height of a lot of people being like, now what? What the heck am I supposed to do now? So it's a gift, right? And it's easier than you think to write a book. You just have to step out of your own way and see that fear as a compliment for sure.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you sort of have this view that things kind of aligned the way they were meant to, because a lot of people would look at that, especially when you've dedicated so much of yourself to doing something like this.
Yeah.
People would look at it like, well, maybe it's not meant to happen. Maybe I need to walk away. Whereas actually, intrinsically, it kind of worked perfectly given the circumstances of the world at the time.
Oh yeah. When it happened, I just started like laugh crying because I didn't know what to do. Aww. That's the way I react to it. I was like, this is so hilarious. I don't know what to do. This is hilarious. And then, like analogy I've been using a lot lately that was kind of channeled down to me is in life, it's like connect the dots. When you're a kid and you do that, connect the dots, and you're making a Dalmatian. And you might not even know exactly what this Dalmatian looks like because you have to go from one step to the next to the next. So sometimes there's some dots to connect and it may have not worked out the way that you wanted to. And you're like, why am I even connecting these dots? And it's not until the picture is formed that you realize, oh, that was necessary for my path. So,
yes. I love that. That's actually a perfect visual because I'm, of course, picturing all the little ones that we did when we were kids. And I'm like, you could skip a number, but then it doesn't look the same. And that's life, right? You can skip some steps, but it's not going to look the same. And it's still going to turn out as a picture.
Right. A beautiful one at that.
Oh, I love this. This is amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast though, since we are on a podcast and I am like a huge fan of podcasts, totally obsessed with podcasts. For people who listen to this one, they know I now subscribe to like 200 different podcasts. It's becoming overwhelming, but because so many people have such great podcasts. So what made you want to start a podcast?
Yeah, it's just, again, a bucket list thing that I wanted to bring into fruition. And with the pandemic, things were, there wasn't as much outside things that were going on. So I had a little bit more time and I had thought about how impactful it is to have conversations. I actually had a Facebook interview series that I would have people come and talk about how they found clarity in their life and share more about what they do and give people tangible steps to help them in that process. So then I thought, okay, let's move this over to this podcast thing. Let's give this a try. We'll see what happens. And now it's been over a year of doing it, posting every week. And it's just brought me so much joy to help people to find clarity in a different platform, in a different way, and have amazing conversations with people that are doing great things in the world and hearing their stories, how they got to where they are, and having that tangibility. I really love when people are finished with the podcast, if they have like 3 tips or like 3 strategies to take action towards what it is that they want to do. So I
love this. And for everyone listening, I will, of course, post in the show notes, not just the social media links, but the podcast links so that you can follow as well. Because frankly, there's just, in my personal view, there's just not enough people doing this kind of thing. There are lots of great podcasts, but the fact that your podcast is about chatting with people, having tangible steps, helping people make a difference in their lives, right? Improve their life, whatever that means to you individually. I think it's so important right now because both of us are Canadian. And so we've lived through the last couple of years of lockdowns and struggle. And we know a lot of people who have decided the life they were living wasn't working for them now that we've gone through this. So what do you do next? And this is a good way for people to start to think about that.
Right. And I love to have people that are very different from me on there with different walks of life, different modalities, right? Because it's a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs that come on. So we even bring in some of those different types of modalities that can help them to find clarity. Because it could be one thing for someone. It could be sound healing, or we had like an herbologist on there, crystals, those kind of things coming into your life at a certain time could help you unlock that clarity. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Cool, and it is different for everyone. I know over the last, I'd say 18 months or so, I've been learning about gene keys and human design. And for me, that's been huge, right? Because it's given me an additional understanding of myself. Whereas for people who know me, they're like, well, this just seems like absolutely insane and I don't want to learn about it. And that's okay, right? It's about having all of the options.
Yeah. Having like a taster menu of all the different things. I don't know about you, but I'm the person that like, when you go to eat, I love to get a bunch of appetizers and like try everything. I don't like to be limited. And, so it's kind of like that for everyone. There's lots of vast different people with different backgrounds on the podcast. So check it out.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I will post the link for that in the show notes. I do want to ask you some questions because I typically end the podcast by asking a few questions, and the community for Chasing Happiness really likes to use these as a catalyst in their everyday life. So it's fun to kind of see how people answer them. So the first one is, what inspires you?
My clients, honestly, really, really inspire me. Just to see the light bulb moments, just to see how they completely go for it, just to see the way that they're showing up and applying the work. I really commend people that not only learn stuff in a book or a podcast or in a coaching session, but actually go for it and give it 100% and get the results in rapid speed. So yeah, that really inspires me to just continue to better myself and get more tools and help more and impact more.
I love that. And you touch on something that I think is really important for everyone listening. The journey is never really over because you start to learn and you start to grow, and then you get curious about more learning and more growth. So it never really ends. There is no end goal. It's just about improvement every day, whatever that means.
Yes. Huge. I love to have the biggest toolbox ever. So whenever there's like a different modality that's out, like breath work is what I've been doing a lot lately. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to try that next. So yeah.
Have you tried Wim Hof?
Pardon?
Have you tried Wim Hof breathing yet?
No, what's that?
Oh, I will send you a link when we're done this.
Yeah.
So I love Wim Hof. It's very intense. And like, he actually focuses on this like cold shower breath work stuff too, that I'm just starting to dive into. And it's very intrusive to your neural system, but like kind of in the best way. I'm starting to become obsessed with it. So I will send you a link and you can look into it. It might be a little too intense for you. It might not. I have a girlfriend who's like, it's just too intense. I can't do it. And that's okay. But for me, breath work has been really important for me over the last little, I'd say 10 years or so. And finding different forms of breath work is really interesting to me because we both know, given our education, how important just calming your nervous system can be. But interrupting those cycles is also important and harder to do sometimes. So yes, I will send you a link because I think you might actually enjoy it.
Okay, awesome.
The next question is, if you could have a conversation with anyone, who would it be and why?
Well, it's a good question. I would say my grandfather. He was one of my biggest inspirations. He passed away when I was 5. He's one of my guides in my life. And it would just be cool to speak to him as an adult and not a 5-year-old and just see how the conversation would unfold. So yeah.
I love that. Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think such a great reminder for everyone listening. Like, if you still have people in your life, whether it's grandparents, aunts, uncles, if you haven't sat down and had those conversations, this is a great reason to do that, right? Because we are losing so many stories. We are losing so much history, even just within our own families, because those generations didn't openly talk about those things, right? And I think it's really important for us to have an idea of all of that.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I love that. That's a fantastic answer. The next question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
To be honest, that's a big part of the podcast too. So if I'm not conversing with a guest, I'm giving advice to myself, my like version of myself. Maybe it's the girl that was starting her business. Maybe it was the girl that was having her now what moment or needed some confidence advice. But the biggest thing that I wish I knew back then, even when I was at Brock, is to like embrace the journey more. You know, sometimes I was caught up with what I call destination syndrome, when you're so obsessed with getting to the goal that I wasn't as present and I didn't enjoy the process as much. And I feel like there's so much gifts in every step and so much appreciation to be had for every baby step that you take. So yeah, embrace the journey. As cheesy as it is.
Oh, I love that, especially because today, actually, I shared a quote by Eckhart Tolle on my social media, because he was talking about the fact that we are always looking towards what the next moment is rather than actually being present in the current moment. And it's so true, especially when we're focused on our hopes, our dreams, our goals, right? We're not actually sitting down and just being in the moment, which is where the transformation happens.
Yes.
But so often we're looking towards, okay, once I get through this moment, then I get to the next step. So I love that.
Yay, I'm glad.
The last question is, what does happiness mean to you?
Good question. I would say that happiness and fulfillment kind of are hand in hand with me. To find fulfillment in what it is that I'm creating, but at the same time, being happy and fulfilled in every moment. I guess it's kind of connected to the other question. Because to give a little bit of a backstory, I was actually living in Mexico last year for 4 months, and it was like the vision board to a T. Everything. Like I remember being there and waking up the first morning to the sunshine and just crying as I opened the curtains. Aww. Because it was exactly what I visualized and manifested, you know? And when I came back to Canada and it's winter and it's cold here and not necessarily the same level of vision board picture as it just was, it really made me sit with and become present with finding fulfillment no matter what's happening on the outside. No matter the lockdowns, I came back to pretty much a lockdown, no matter any of that. How can I find fulfillment in every step of the journey? And I started to get a pen and paper and started thinking about what brings me happiness, what brings me fulfillment, and simple things like cuddling with the dog, light bulb moment with the client, having an espresso coffee in the morning and just being present with it. Like how you can find fulfillment and happiness in every step of the journey. And I think that only turns the dial and accelerates the process of you achieving what you want, is really tapping into it every step.
Oh, I love this. I love this for so many different reasons. One, totally obsessed with the Nespresso coffee. I got a Virtuoso just before Christmas. And I'm telling you, I probably drink double the amount of coffee now, and I just don't care because I love it so much.
Love it.
But the fact that what you're talking about really is something that so many of us, especially right now here as Canadians, you know, we're coming out of these sort of lockdowns again and getting back to normal life. But so many of us have spent the last couple of years really just trying to survive the day and not focusing on those little moments of joy, no matter how small they are. Oh.
Yeah. The more you focus on that, the more happy you're going to feel, right? I think there seems to be this overall theme, correct me if I'm wrong, from this conversation today. It's like sometimes we just get so caught up on the outside and the shoulds and people's opinions and society and chaos of the world that it creates such a disconnect from creating that happiness and fulfillment that we all want. So I think it's getting present to those moments and having, you know, a moment to be grateful.
Yes.
For conversations like this. I'm feeling super happy and grateful and fulfilled to have this conversation with you and with the audience today. And yeah.
Oh, right back at you. I've loved this. And for people who are listening, what I'm going to put in the show notes, obviously all the ways they can find you and get in touch, but what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Instagram. I hang out there the most.
Me too.
Lots of content on Instagram. Love connecting with you. Like DM me and just be like, hey, Cassandra, like I listened to the podcast and let's connect. I would love to learn about how to best support you in your journey with whether it's free resources or working with me in a coaching setting. So yeah, Instagram. Perfect. It is. It's Cassandra Rosa A is the handle.
Perfect. And I will, of course, put that in the show notes as well and tag you in all the social media when we actually have this episode live. And I live on Instagram too. Honestly, it's funny because I'm really not a social media person. Like I am not into that, but I love Instagram. I love seeing people be real on Instagram. I love the pretty stuff on Instagram. I love the messy stuff on Instagram. There's just something about Instagram that draws me in a way that none of the other social media platforms ever have. So yes, Instagram always for me too.
Yes. Love it. We have to follow each other.
Yes. Actually, I think I am following you now because after I was reading your website and as we were talking before we started, I realized how much of our stories are similar in a lot of ways. And I was like, oh, yes, follow. So yes, I'm pretty sure we are connected there now. But for everyone listening, again, I will post in the show notes all of the links so that you can get in touch and you can follow. And Cassandra, this has been amazing. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I look forward to connecting with you more and with the audience more.
Wonderful. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate that you guys come back week after week. 6 years into this thing, I still am blown away every single week when you come back and download episodes. So thank you for listening. Have a great week and we will chat with you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.